Hey everyone, thanks for joining DPE Showdown, DevProdEng Showdown, which stands for Developer Productivity Engineering Showdown. And that's what we're here for, is to, in a very short 30 minutes, get you to learn something new around developer productivity engineering. And we just want to promote the importance of that. And today's theme is open source, which we're super excited about. So let's jump into it. Here's how it's going to work. We have 4 amazing contestants. They're going to get 30 seconds each on each topic, and you, the audience, gets to vote via the Zoom polling mechanism on who you think gave the best point. Who do you think you learned something new from? That's what we're trying to do here today. We're hoping that you learn some cool life hacks around productivity engineering and scale around open source so you can take back. And so vote for the folks that helped you learn something new today. I want to introduce our panelists. Luke Daley, he works with me at Gradle. He is heavily active in Gradle open source and Rat Pack and whatnot. Next, Josh Long, Mr. Spring. You know him as he's the face of Spring, right? He's been at every conference in the world talking about Spring and Spring Boot, and very active in the open source community. Looking forward to learning some stuff from him. Old friend, Fred Simon, co-founder of JFrog, ex-CTO. He's currently the chief data scientist, right? I always have great conversations when I hang out with Fred, so can't wait to see how he contributes to the show. Last but not least, we got Jigyasa from Twitter. She's an ML engineer at Twitter. She's the co-author of the book Sculpting Data for ML, Red Hat Woman Open Source Award winner. And those are our 4 panelists. So let's jump into the first topic. Which open source library project changed your life? Easy, fun one. Luke Daley, you're up first.
I'd have to say the Grails web framework about 12 years ago, actually. That was really the first time I got the opportunity to collaborate with developers all over the world, which was pretty mind-blowing for me at the time, coming from a small town. And through that, I met a lot of really great people, including Mr. Spock himself, Peter Niederwieser. He created the Spock testing framework. And through that, I met Hans Doctor, who was the CEO of Gradle. That led me to joining the Gradle project. So without that, things would have been quite a bit different, I'd imagine.
Great story, Luke. Love it. Josh, you're up next. Which open source library changed your life?
Spring Framework. It stopped me from defecting and becoming a .NET developer back in the early 2000s. It made me appreciate that the emperor had no clothes, that the alternative they were propagating wasn't particularly useful.
Awesome. Okay. Fred, you're up next. Which open source project changed your life?
Of the whole Java community and the Gradle community. And finally, you can now manage your Java jar.
Nice one, Fred. Jigyasa, why don't you wrap it up?
Sure. So I have a very unusual story of jumping onto the open source bandwagon. I started contributing not because I planned to, but because a project named Pharaoh caught my eye on my Twitter feed to the then 18 years old me. I thought the name sounded more like an Egyptian mummy than like an immersive programming experience, kind of an IDE and OS rolled into one. So that's why that project changed the entire course of my life, because that's how I got started into open source, getting first enticed by its name and then opening up a bunch of opportunities for me.
Awesome. Love it. All great stories. And I love that. So audience, now it's your turn to vote for who gave the best point. All right. Let's see the results here. Hey, Luke Daley with a Jigyasa a close second. Nice one. It was a good warm-up question to kind of get things going, right? So let's get into the more funner stuff. Which tools are essential for enabling open source projects? Jigyasa, you're up first.
Open source, I would say the foremost tool would be a communication channel, and a culture that builds, a community which is motivated enough to contribute to it, because that is exactly how I got started. I had like a IRC back in those days where I just like randomly posted a message, hey, I'm interested in open source. Can you let me know like how to get started with? And that's where I started. And then like obviously following up with demos, tutorials, and a recommended code editor with custom plugins. So I would say those are the most essential tools for enabling open source projects.
I love it. Great answer. Fred, what about you? Which tools were essential for you guys for just enabling open source projects?
Well, any tools that reduce friction when you want to get started. You really love something that you see, and you need to be able to get into it and get started. And if it takes you a full week to be able to change a line of code and see the impact, it doesn't work. So Gradle, of course, is helping, Maven, and everything. But lately, I spend a lot of time with scientific tools, and I use Conan to set up my system, and the Conan framework and Conan.io really saved my day in half a day.
Awesome. Conan.io. I love that. All right. Who's next? We got Josh. Which tools helped you and team Josh at Spring?
Software's a team sport. That's cliche, of course. So, seconding what they said, but the idea that you can have a place to commit changes, see the pipeline, see the build, see that all without having to set up a lot. In fact, you don't even have to download anything if you wanted to, in theory. So like things like GitHub, that's, I think, game-changing, obviously.
Nice. All right. Luke, to wrap it up, which tools are essential for enabling open source projects?
Yeah, I have a bit of a similar take. I think more than anything else, you need tools that let users engage with the experts behind the project and engage with each other. So in my career, probably the most profound development I can think of regarding this is the rise of GitHub and similar tools. They just encourage more contribution, make it easier for people to support users and creators to talk to each other. And if you want users for a project, you need to be able to engage with them. I think that's really changed the way that works. It's had a profound impact.
Nice. We got 2 GitHubs and a Conan.io and an IRC. Nice. It was good. I mean, at least not everybody said GitHub, so that's good. All right, audience, time for you to vote on who do you think gave the best point. All right, let's see the results. Jigyasa, there you go. Amazing. Great answer. Okay, we got Luke and Jigyasa, 1 each, but it's not about the points. It's about having fun and learning something new. So let's go to the next one. Developer productivity in open source. What tools, open source tools, have you found very helpful for increasing productivity of your project, your developers at scale? First up here, Fred.
Yeah, so I went one day to an amazing project that did an amazing automation and build and CI test and really great stuff. And it was going very nicely, and nothing was flowing. And they were using ClearCase. As soon as we changed the ClearCase to Git, the productivity went through the roof. So, I mean, this is the first thing that you need to put in place if you really want to increase your developer productivity at scale. At the end of the day, there is only Git.
All right. Who's next? Josh, what about you guys? What have you seen at Spring that's really improved productivity?
I don't know any one particular thing that I can think of that improves Spring, but from my perspective, the single most friendly thing you can do for your user is get something like Gradle, something like Maven, because you want a repeatable build. If I can't clone your code and then get it to compile, I'm not going to be able to make changes to it. I'm not going to engage with it. It has to be reproducible, and it has to work quickly on my local machine. So that, I think, is, that's the welcome mat that you want when you work with open source.
Build speed, right? It's a big thing. You don't want folks waiting around. So, all right, who's next? Luke.
Yeah, probably no surprises in my answer, but I'd take Gradle Build Tool for me. Though if Gradle Enterprise was open source, I would have said that. I always find myself working on projects that do much more than compile and test, and need some degree of custom automation, like code generation or something like that. And Gradle lets me do that without much fuss. I can customize it as I need to. It's fast, and those customizations work well in the IDE, which is important for me. It's also part of the bootstrapping story. So I have to say Gradle.
Nice. So we got 3 build tool answers. So looking forward what Jigyasa has to say here with her ML kind of background. Jigyasa, what do you think?
Sure. In my opinion, when you're navigating like a big code base, sometimes knowing the exact place where you need to make the change is much more important than, thousands of different tools enabling you how to make the change. And for that reason, SourceGraph is one of my personal favorite tools for increasing developer productivity. It's kind of like universal code search engine to, navigate the database, like code base. And personally speaking, I struggle with indexing on IntelliJ every day that I can literally boil an egg on my laptop. So for me, SourceGraph is the way to go.
Nice plug for SourceGraph. All right, let's see. And thanks, Luke, for plugging Gradle Enterprise. Thank you from me to you. Yes. All right, audience, why don't you vote for who gave the best point? All right, here comes the results. Jigyasa again. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.
All right, that's a good one. Okay, so closed source versus open source type question. How is developer productivity in engineering different for open source community projects versus closed source internal projects? Josh, you're up first. What do you think?
I don't think there's a difference, except for maybe the repository is private. I think if you want to work on your code, it should be as easy as possible. Again, reiterating what was said earlier, it should be as easy as possible to get the code, make changes, see the build fail or work, contribute issues, collaborate with other people, etc. So I don't really want to work in an organization where the proprietary code is much different than the what you.
All right. Luke, you're up next. What do you think? Does Josh make sense? It should be the same. Should it not? How do you feel about this?
I think maybe it should be the same, but it's often not in my experience. I think that, as we've touched on before, the setup for an open source project or a community project is incredibly important. That onboarding experience, people are contributing in their free time, and nobody wants to deal with build issues in their free time, not even me. So I think that for those kind of projects, the onboarding and is the best thing to optimize, make sure that's a smooth experience and people contribute easily. For internal projects, that usually optimizing the day-to-day tasks can be a bit more fruitful.
Yeah. And also there's the money factor, right? You got your company has money to throw at this problem versus how do you get that for your open source project? I don't know if Jigyasa, you want to tap into that or not, no pressure, but you're up next.
Sure. So the end goal of developer productivity engineering in both closed source and open source might be the same, but definitely there are a few contrasts. The first that I can think of is the requirement elicitation process, because the target groups in closed source is very much focused as compared to open source. And also historically, closed source projects work on a relatively tighter deadlines than open source. There's like the speed of development is another difference that crops up. Another thing that I can talk about is the inbuilt feedback channel that is again more looped in closed source than open source.
Very good point. Fred, what about you? Wrap it up. I mean, you guys work at a tooling company, right? How do you feel about this, right?
I really think that what the open source brought changed actually the way we do closed source. So I totally agree with Josh. It should not be different. All the benefit of open source should go to the closed source environment. And we see it in the communication, by the way, now that we are remote, all the great open source remote discussion and interaction and the way we build a community is really, really helping now that companies are full of people that are locked down at home. And so everybody benefit from that.
Nice. This was a good one. Audience, what do you think? Who gave the best points? Time for you to vote. Jigyasa again. Oh my God, you're killing it. No, you made a great point there. And I also think because a lot of our audience are very Java, JVM based, so that you're coming in with a different perspective, and it's really refreshing and amazing. Okay, question number 5. What are the biggest challenges for organizations using open source software libraries when it comes to developer productivity engineering? You're using someone else's project. It could have things breaking cacheability and whatnot in there, right? That's just my experience working at Gradle. But what else are you folks kind of seeing there? Luke, you're up first.
Sure. Yeah, there are lots of libraries out there and different tools and things that are a dead end or even a direct hazard at times. But there are far more libraries that provide a lot of real value. So I think, how do you come up with a system that lets developers do their job efficiently by allowing them to utilize such things without sapping their will to live with bureaucracy involved in making that happen? So while at the same time managing vulnerabilities, license compliance, and dependency hell from multiple versions, it's pretty tricky. So I think that's a huge challenge.
All right. That's good points. And, at Gradle Land, we kind of live in that regularly. Josh, what do you think? What's your perspective on this?
There's so many source technologies out there. It's just the integration of those different things that are otherwise not meant to work with each other. And so one of the things that's been a big win for Spring Boot users is right out of the gate, we have dependency management. We worked with Gradle, we worked with the Maven teams to make sure that we could, provide starters that level set all the dependencies, make sure that you have a well-known, understood to work together sort of set of dependencies from third parties.
All right. That's a good one. Dependency management. That's great to solve that. Fred, what do you think?
Yeah, no, the issue of taking a library that nobody maintains anymore and that is kind of dead or that community is an issue. But at the end of the day, what's the most important is to be able to trust your updates and trust the flow. And I really like the advent of Dependabot and other tools like that allow us to keep up to date with all our dependencies. And we should be able to automate this process completely. We should delegate the update of the dependency to trusted source.
Nice. It seems like dependency management is a problem for many folks. What about from your side, Jigyasa, from the ML side? What do you see there?
In machine learning, I would say 90% of the applications today are created, based on open source or any custom layer on top of it. But there are biggest advantages, even if not using smaller projects, not user-friendly interfaces or documentation to set up, even with bigger projects like TensorFlow, Apache Airflow, Kubeflow. The issue is the regular updates. And sometimes when you're working in a bigger organization, you have to have custom layers on top of it for it to build for your specific application. And that is one of the biggest challenges we face.
Great answer. All right, audience, let's kick off this poll. Tell us who you think made the best point. Jigyasa again with Fred with a close one. Fred, I thought you'd get it with that tool recommendation there. But yeah, Jigyasa, nice one.
That was a close one. Thank you, folks, again.
All right. Question number 6. This is my favorite because I picked it, right? But which open source project are you most in awe of for its scale and success? And we want to know why. Just don't tell us which one, but why? What you saw that you're like, that's so amazing. How did they accomplish X, Y, and Z so fast? That's kind of what we're looking for here. Jigyasa, you're up first.
Sure. I'm a machine learning engineer by profession, so how can I not mention TensorFlow? It's like an open source end-to-end platform for machine learning, right from preparing data, training, validating, deploying models. You can start it as a student who's just testing the waters, or at a company like Twitter where we have several of models doing ranking and prediction, serving millions of people at once. We know random regular progress in terms of TPUs, TensorFlow, Lite, TensorBoard. It's like a one-stop shop. And did I mention that it was one of the top 5 frameworks and libraries by the 2020 Stack Overflow survey that happened last year?
Nice. Yeah, big one for TensorFlow. Fred, what do you think? Which project are you in awe of for its success and scale?
Yeah, so maybe I'm going to show my age, but no, Linux is just freaking amazing. I started to use it in 99 and 2000 and deploy it at customers on JBoss. And then after deploying a bunch of all kind of Java and non-Java application on it, it's just really a freaking project, and it really changed the world in which we live in. Nothing will work right now without Linux.
Yeah, that's a good one. Josh, what about you?
Well, no surprise here. I love Spring, and I think it's been very successful and very scaled. The first lines of code were written in 2001, so it's a 20-year-old project. It's been super popular 2 different times. It's gotten to that peak 2 different times. Changed the community, changed the world, changed the Java community. It's the most widely used thing on the JVM, except for individual libraries like JUnit and Log4j, right? But in terms of any particular framework, it's certainly the most prolific. And there's millions of apps. There's tens of millions of developers out there using it and knowing it and building tools on it and integrating with it and so on.
No surprise there, right, Josh, with Spring. Of course, he wrote the book Reactive Spring, right? Make sure you buy a copy of that. Luke Daley, why don't you wrap it up?
Yeah, sure. So I actually have the same answer as Josh. I think Spring in the JVM space is hard to go past. It's been around for a long time, as Josh said. And I think what's really interesting to me is that it found a sweet spot that appeals to a lot of developers. So something about it is attractive and appeals to a large class of developers. And it's reinvented itself several times. Not many projects do that successfully. That's hard. It's also a lot of different components, and they all feel springy in a certain sense. So they're kind of the way that they work and the brand gets through everything. Everything's also not easy to do.
Yeah, nice. We got two for Spring, Linux, TensorFlow. All right, audience, what do you think? Nice, Fred. I think we got a lot of Linux fans here, right? So that's a good one. Okay. All right. Question number 7. This one's a lightning round, folks. So we got 15 seconds each. So just one thing that makes an open source project successful. What would that be? Fred, you're up first.
It needs to be useful. That's the only thing it needs to be. I need to get usefulness out of it. It needs to be simple, focused, targeted. I need to know what I expect out of it. And if I can use it, it's a good open source tool. And after all, the rest follow.
All right. It needs to be useful, right? Simple, right? Josh, what do you think? What's the
same
one
thing? I was gonna say that the one thing was community, but then Fred gave an even better answer. Like, if it's not useful, it doesn't matter if there's a community. So you need that first. Let the chicken before the egg, or egg before the chicken.
All right, egg before the chicken. Okay, that's what I got from that. All right, Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it needs users, ultimately. Without achieving some kind of critical mass of users, it's not going to be successful and fall away. And wherever possible, financially compensating the developers behind it doesn't hurt either, if you can pull that off.
All right. Jigyasa, what do you think, to wrap it up?
For sure. Like, I totally agree with all they said. The first impression is the last impression, and the elevator pitch about what real problem it solves, how it solves the issue, and how you can help contribute to it, because after all, it's an open source project. So statistically, you should spend like about 50% of the time investing in the README and stuff.
And nobody said, promoting the open source project, right? It's kind of like if a tree falls in the middle of the forest, does anybody get to hear? You got this amazing thing, but people aren't sharing it, right? But then again, what Josh could say could be right. I love the favorite quote here, egg before the chicken. Audience, why don't you vote? Fred, nice. He's got 2 points. Get in there. All right, we had a tiebreaker question, but it's not about the points. It's about learning something new and having some fun. So let's just jump into this tiebreaker question. So similar to the last one, kind of, but what does it take to make an open source project sustainable? Let's see, who should we have go first here? Luke, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. I really like the work that the Apache Software Foundation does in this area. I think a lot of the things they put in place and a lot of the ways they help projects with governance and procedures actually helps a lot here. So it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of projects fall off by the wayside, but I think the kind of things that they do really help. And ultimately having a critical mass of users that are really invested in the project not dying is probably the best way to keep it going ultimately.
Nice. Great answer. Josh, what do you think?
Really good really good attention to the core design of the code is critical. We have, famously, there's Jürgen Haller, works on the Spring team, who's the designer, the architect of the original sort of code. Spring 1.0 applications, if you upgrade them to Spring 5.3 or whatever it is today, they'll still run. There's no backwards incompatibility.
Okay, love it. Fred?
Well, I have to disagree with Josh because I told him that I will disagree online. There are a lot of very sustainable open source projects that have really bad code. And I think the main idea for me is the feedback loop with your users. If your users are giving you back feedback, you're good.
All right. Jigyasa, to close it out.
Sure. I totally agree with Fred about, the feedback loop, but I also believe, like, as I said, promotion, increased awareness, low barriers of entry, and then easy accessibility to quality code are the things that make open source projects sustainable because, I guess my time's up.
Okay, great. Audience, why don't you vote? Oh, wow, we got a double tie. Yeah, and it was all very close. Jigyasa, you're the winner, and you get kind of your 15 seconds of fame. I don't know why Luke is on there, but we got to kick out Luke from that screen, but it's okay. Jigyasa, thank you. Tell us you got your 15 seconds here.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I definitely had a fun time in this DP showdown. If you're getting started into machine learning and data and want to get started with, how to build your own data set, do check out the book Sculpting Data for ML. It is like a code by code example on how you can build your very own data set to work with machine learning. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. And thanks to all of you. Like I said, it's not about the points, right? It's about the conversation. And thanks for the audience for joining. Our next DP showdown is Android Builds and Scale in August. I want to thank the whole team at Gradle for sponsoring this, and the team and the Spring folks for letting Josh participate, and JFrog folks for letting Fred participate, and Luke Daley, 3 a.m. in Australia, coming in and still getting a couple of points. It's nice. And of course, Jigyasa, you did a wonderful job for bringing that ML perspective to the Java world. Thank you all, and we'll see you next month.